This is Ann Arbor's Talk Station, 1290 WLBY. One of our regular features on these Saturdays is with Damian Farrell, local architect with Damian Farrell Design Group, and it is called Damian on Design. And we have been talking about the state of Michigan as a state of design and meeting some fascinating people along the way. One of those is our guest today, and he is exactly what we have been talking about on the show for so many years. How do we get young people to come back to the state of Michigan after working elsewhere, after leaving here from college?
We have found a person who epitomizes the word epitome.
That's right.
How's that for a big thought for a Saturday morning?
That is excellent, Damian. Great to have you back with us.
Thank you.
You work a lot with young people, mentoring them and
I do.
Working with them and becoming architects as
Yes.
well. And our guest's father actually was instrumental in that.
Yes, Tom Mathison, out of Grand Rapids, started this program, I think about 10 years ago now. And it's a mentoring program in which licensed practitioners, AIE members, are assigned a student at an architecture school or design school near them if they volunteer, and then they mentor them. So they're available for questions, for guidance, for help, really anything that the students are looking for. And I had a very interesting meeting this week with graduate students, and my student participated in that, looking at their portfolios as they strike out into the big wide world next year to look for jobs. So
That's great. We do a lot of mentoring on our show with young people too, and I think it's so important to encourage them.
It's a lot of fun too, isn't it?
It really is.
Yeah.
Well, the son of Tom Mathison, Evan Mathison, is our guest today, and he and his father have now teamed up, and they have formed Mathison Architects out of Grand Rapids. Evan, you have spent the last 10 years in Boston. You're a graduate of the University of Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
Your degree is in
architecture.
And then you went out to Harvard
Yep,
University.
to the Harvard Graduate School of Design in 2003, and we stayed there for 10 years, and it was a fantastic experience.
Projects that you worked on would include what out there?
Projects that I worked on after I graduated with, I started with Marianne Thompson Architects. She was one of my professors at Harvard, and she brought me into her office. We did everything from institutional educational facilities to high-end residential. And we had a lot of public projects that were pretty high profile, and that experience allowed me to sort of learn a lot about her approach to design and how that would sort of lead into my career.
And that included something in Brooklyn as well.
Yeah, Brooklyn Bridge Park was probably one of the biggest projects I worked on, and I started working on that right after grad school. And there were two buildings right on the East River in the shadow of Brooklyn Heights, about 1.5 miles, 1.3 miles of Brooklyn waterfront, and overlooked lower Manhattan. And we had a small cafe building with a roof deck, and then also a 5-acre open-air sports structure.
what's the name of the project, Evan? Because it's worth seeing if anyone's interested.
Yeah, Brooklyn Bridge Park.
Brooklyn Bridge Park, okay.
We were a consultant to Michael Van Valkenburg Landscape Associates out of New York, and it was a pretty complicated team. There was a lot of infrastructural issues to deal with, and the outcome was pretty nice.
And your father, having worked all these years in Grand Rapids as well for a firm, now venturing out with you on this firm you started together.
Absolutely.
The projects he's worked on, a lot of them were institutional as well.
Yep, he did a lot of institutional and higher ed work, a lot of master planning, and he has focused more on the commercial and larger scale projects around Michigan and the Midwest, and he has a deep knowledge of issues that surround education.
So why are you coming back to Michigan now at this time in your life?
We decided to come back because we had this opportunity to start this office together, my dad and I. And we also, we started a family in Boston. My wife and I have 2 children, and so moving back really allows us to be surrounded by our family and friends.
We love when they come back home,
Yeah,
bringing with them
It's a great story, isn't it?
a multitude of talents now that he has acquired.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Michigan as a state of design, and perhaps you can point to projects your father has worked on as well, and what you're going to bring to the plate now for this state. What is your impression?
Well, part of the reason that we love the idea of starting an office in Grand Rapids was West Michigan is a natural design center. with all the furniture industries. There's a lot of manufacturing there. There's a lot of opportunity for small business. And my dad has been very involved with the Small Business Association at the Michigan level and also at the national level. So, there's sort of a cultural shift happening in Grand Rapids. There's a generational shift, and where people who are in their 30s and 40s are, starting to grow businesses and buy homes and have families, and they don't necessarily want to live in the same houses that their parents lived in. So, my perspective coming from New England is that there's a higher level of residential design that we can provide.
I looked at a house that you did out in Newton, Massachusetts, that you had worked on. This house, I can't believe someone paid more than $1 million for. It looks like an average ranch you'd find in Ann Arbor,
Absolutely.
didn't it, Damian?
Yeah, it really struck us as that, didn't it?
They poured in another, what, million?
Another 1.3 or so,
Yeah.
And ended up selling it for?
over 3 million.
And the design is just beautiful.
Yeah.
Incredible what you
It's
did.
interesting because those early and mid-century moderns, which we are finding countrywide, and as you know, we did a couple of shows on the whole mid-century modern movement. The one out of Cranbrook, and then the one up in East up in East Lansing. They're very simple. They came about at a time when it was just a need for housing. They were quite practical, quite small, very compact. We're doing a bunch of them here in Ann Arbor and remodeling them. They're really wonderful to work with, I've found. They provide a really interesting background of things that you can now add to. And what Evan did with that house is just stunning. I mean, he opened it up, lifted the roofs, brought the light in, brought the views in. They're great, I hate to say it, the cliche, they're great bones to work with.
Yeah.
They really are.
They absolutely are.
I mean,
And-
they tend to be small lots,
Yep,
so it's very efficient
yep.
from
And
some
smaller
points of view.
homes as well, post-war, and I think that that sort of approach to design, smaller, higher quality, is something that's starting to connect with young professionals. West Michigan is becoming a place where young professionals are moving back home. There's a large medical infrastructure that's being implemented in the city right now, and downtown Grand Rapids is becoming a place that's more interesting. And those values, I think, are something that young people who are not just locally focused, but regional and nationally focused, or even internationally focused, as they go and get their educations elsewhere and move back home, they have a perspective that's more broad.
Yeah.
And people in their 30s and 40s are, they demand high quality services.
Yeah.
And
They want flexibility, they want options.
and they're connected. They know what's going on. They've grown up in the internet age. They understand how to learn about things quickly and efficiently. And those sort of ideals, people are buying small houses and then renovating them, or adding on to them. And those values actually really resonate with the sort of mid-century stock that we have here. And the sustainability, sustainable design approaches, looking at passive house and efficiency.
And healthy houses, healthy materials, healthy
Absolutely.
finishes.
Smaller and higher quality is really the future of sustainable design.
And we're seeing that approach with empty nesters here in Ann Arbor. We have 6 projects now in the office that are exactly this, taking houses from the 40s, 50s, and 60s for empty nesters, and just doing small things to them to change the house to create the lifestyle that our empty nester clients want. So, 1 or 2 bedrooms, nice bathroom, nice kitchen, outdoor space, something unusual, something that brings in the light. I've never seen this emphasis on contemporary, clean, modern in Ann Arbor. It's pretty refreshing. What we're seeing in our office in the last 2 years.
You
Big change.
get to see it more in Ann Arbor than I do in Grand Rapids, and my goal is to bring some of that attitude and mentality to Grand Rapids. And one of the things that I valued so much about my Michigan Ed education was this sort of deep rooted education and really sort of being connected to the environment, and also I think that the sort of ethics of the Midwest and of Michigan. Heart not being sort of afraid to get into the project and put in the time was something that really helped me when I went to the East Coast to grad school.
Interesting.
And also in my office that I worked for. And we made partnerships with prefab companies that I think will also really work well in the Midwest.
We're hearing more about that with prefab companies kind of making a return. What are you seeing?
Well, prefab is used at some level in almost all scales of residential design. You normally see sort of modular construction, which is kind of stacked boxes, or panelized construction. And what we did a lot of research in this, and we actually had in 2009, we were part of the Dwell Home series, and that was one of the projects that I designed and managed. And it was, we went to LA and we released it, and it was a pretty exciting time because what we found was that really the best way to implement to implement a sort of prefab approach was really to think about the system as a kit of parts. And I've worked with this company called Deck House Company out of Acton, Massachusetts, and I've done sort of a lot of projects with them. And we've done full houses, we've done additions to houses that are prefab. We've used parts of their prefab system, like the windows, on a completely custom design project. So really thinking about them as a resource rather than sort of a complete design package is something that really should sort of provide access to the prefab market.
And that helps with the energy efficiency, I understand, as well.
Well, the quality is so much higher as well, because these things are built, they have to travel. So just by inference, the quality has to be very high. When you build it in a factory, it's very true, your environmental conditions are constant. You can be very specific about how things are done, far more so than in the field when you're dealing with lousy weather, mud conditions, all those sorts of things.
Absolutely.
And you can cut because we've done a fair amount of prefab. In fact, we have one, we just got the commission this week to do a large one here in Ann Arbor, which is going to be very exciting. And it's all, you're going to save money on time, on interest costs. If you're doing market rate stuff, you're going to get people into the houses or into the apartments faster.
That's a good point.
There is so much good to be said for it.
Damian Farrell from Damian Farrell Design Group, also with us, architect Evan Mathison, who's back in Michigan now after spending 10 years out on the East Coast. He's going to be starting this firm with his father, who is leaving his big firm in Grand Rapids, and they're forming Mathison Architects. I want you to do a little futuring for me. As someone who has been immersed in the kind of work that you've been doing, and as a young person, where do you see what our houses are going to look like in the next 20 years?
Great question.
I really hope that I think that design needs to take a stronger position in the way that houses are built, and there's a lot of sort of boilerplate default approaches to housing, especially in West Michigan. And people just don't have high quality of life when they live in a house that's poorly constructed or poorly insulated and corners are cut. And really it's on the shoulders of the architect to sort of take on that ethical responsibility to make sure that things are done right, and sort of provide a meaningful experience for homeowners. And that's something that that we'd like to increase in our practice.
And it sounds like young people get that.
I think so. I think young people expect it. And I think that that's something that they sort of require, and that's something that we need to provide. It's our responsibility to do that.
Great talking with you. Thank you so much for coming into Ann Arbor and giving us a sense of what's going on the west side of the state.
Thanks for having me.
And welcome back to
welcome
Michigan.
back. This was an exciting story.
Evan Mathison on our Damian on Design. Our thanks also to Damian Farrell from Damian Farrell Design Group. You can go to dfdgonline.com for more information about his firm. And soon there will be the Mathison Architects website that will be up and running.
Launching in January, that's right.
Looking forward to
Well,
that.
good luck with it, too.
Thank you so much. We're looking forward to seeing the work that you and your dad do.
Thank you.
You're listening to Ann Arbor's Talk Station. More coming up on the Lucy Ann Lance Show, 1290 WLBY.